Daniel, thank you for that. That was very helpful. I think the next part I want to discuss is kind of the benefits of kind of settling a foreign trust in the U.S. For U.S. Beneficiaries. Maybe this is a foreign grantor trust that we commonly refer to, as opposed to maybe setting up an offshore trust kind of in one of these BVI or Cayman jurisdictions. Do you kind of see a lot of that comparison? Both are kind of foreign trusts for U.S. income tax purposes, but one has a jurisdiction in the U.S., one has a jurisdiction outside of the U.S. How do you kind of typically recommend clients to settle these trusts, and kind of what factors are in play?
Yeah. So, let me preface this by saying, obviously, I'm biased. And I want clients to create their trusts in Delaware or some other United States jurisdiction rather than going offshore. Although, we've had plenty of clients that have done offshore trusts and have had no issues whatsoever. But one of the things that I look at, and what I will discuss with a client that is trying to make that decision, is I think there's some efficiency that can be built in by creating a foreign grantor trust in a United States jurisdiction instead of going offshore. So if we play that out and we have a client that's creating a foreign grantor trust, obviously it's unless there's U.S. source income, it's not going to be subject to U.S. income tax during the lifetime of the grantor. But you're able to create in one trust instrument all the provisions that will apply to the U.S. beneficiaries after the grantor is deceased. So instead of having to potentially go through the process where a grantor creates an offshore trust during the grantor's lifetime, and then maybe has to maybe the trusts that are created for U.S. beneficiaries after the grantor is deceased may then have to move into Delaware or some other U.S. jurisdiction and be modified to update its provisions to be consistent with whatever state's law that they're moving the trust to. It's probably a little bit easier and more efficient to simply create a foreign grantor trust in the United States that will have all those provisions already in place. The trust doesn't have to be moved from, its situs doesn't have to be moved from an offshore jurisdiction to the US, because even if for income tax purposes, it's a foreign trust during the grantor's lifetime, its situs and governing law is in the United States from the beginning. You don't have to go through that process of potentially moving multiple offshore trusts for U.S. beneficiaries into the United States after the grantor is deceased. So that's a discussion that I often have, just to talk about how we might streamline the process. And sometimes clients really like that, and that's a benefit to them. They think it's nice and clean. We're going to have all the necessary provisions in a single document. It's unlikely that we're going to have to move the trust to another jurisdiction. And then there are other clients that just, they really feel like they're going to get some, maybe higher level of creditor protection if they're in an offshore jurisdiction, and they decide to worry about the potential domestication of trust for U.S. beneficiaries. To them, that's maybe a problem for another day. They don't need to be concerned about it. So that's a conversation that I often have with clients who are trying to figure out which way to go when they're going to create this initial foreign trust.
好，刚才Daniel 所讨论的就是一个相对的比较，这是一个美国的 FGT， 我们这样称 FGT Foreign Grantor Trust， 跟一个境外的信托的比较，这样子，就是境外应该在美国税来讲也是一个 FGT， 只是它是设立在美国境外这样子。那我们讨论的结果就是说，他当然还是会比较建议在美国设立这样子的 FGT。那原因就是因为虽然税务来说，这个设立人过世之前，在美国以外的资产 不管你是设立在离岸信托还是设立在美国信托，都不需要去缴纳美国的所得税。但是这里面的信托条文可以等于是，就算设立人过世之后，在美国也非常适用，而且也不会增加这些美国受益人的税负这样子。那他的建议就会是比较是说，设立美国信托，很多家族会觉得这样子里面的条文就不需要设立人过世了以后还要再做相关的修改，还要再做迁移，还要再做 decanting， 这些都会去产生相当高的费用这样子。那他能想到唯一一个他觉得比较常有家族会去设立离岸信托，就是没有设立美国信托，唯一一个原因可能是因为他们家族现在已经可能会有相关跟外人的纠纷，或是他们在美国已经有一些相关的问题，那他这样子可能才不会在美国设立。他觉得极大部分的家族就是没有这些 creditor 这些债权人的风险来说的话，还是会以美国设立 FGT 为主这样子，就是因为这个 FGT 在美国等于以后的条文都会适用，所以以后也不会有相关的成本去需要把离岸信托再搬入美国信托这样子。